My name's Jasper Zimmerman. I'm a journalist right now. I have been since late 2013. Before that, I spent a few years as a researcher at Oxford University's Environmental Change Institute. At an earlier phase in life, I did a PhD in neuroscience, or more precisely, I did all the coursework for a PhD in neuroscience in Vancouver between 1999 and 2001. I had a specific project. I never did that project, and there's a good reason why I never did that project. I decided it was far too dangerous. I was, in fact, in a position where I could have raised money to start a company to build neuromorphic chips. Neuromorphic chips are integrated circuits that are meant to emulate brain functions. So you can pack a few tens of thousands of artificial neurons in hardware in silicon form onto a chip. And of course, you can make as many of these chips as you like. You can modularize that. You can stick them together. And I was going to do that. I had already the connections with the relevant people, and I had some backing from some venture capitalists. And I could have, in fact, gone ahead and built a company and radically sped up the rate of development of this particular field of technology. Everything was great, and they thought my idea was a good idea. And then I discovered, though, that many of the people working on different neuromorphic chip designs were being funded by the US military. And I'm not really sure that it's a great idea to build killer robots. And so I talked to some of these people and said, how do you feel about the ethics of doing what you're doing? And they said, you know, before any of this is really relevant to practical military applications, it's decades in the future, don't worry about it, we're getting our research funding, that's all we care about really. That's essentially what they told me. And they're right to say that, you know, practical applications in the field, that was still some distance in the future. I also knew that this future is coming regardless of what I do. And September 11, 2001 rolled around, and those two airplanes hit the towers in New York. And that made my decision for me. Within an hour of the second airplane hitting the tower, I called up the UBC Department of Neuroscience and withdrew from the program and did not pursue the business project that I had in mind, because I knew that the United States would go bananas in a militaristic direction and lash out to punish somebody for having dared to attack the United States. The speed of, I'm not going to say thought, the speed of processing in neuromorphic systems will be several orders of magnitude faster than in a human system. If you have a system which is designed essentially along the lines of integrate and fire neural networks like our brains, and this thing runs at clock speeds that are maybe 1,000,000 times faster than our clock speeds. You know, the speed of thought in here is maybe 30 meters a second signaling speed in a human brain. The speed of light, I think, is 10 million meters per second, and somewhere in the range towards the higher end of that is going to be the speed of processing in neuromorphic systems. That means that in a second, 1 second of subjective time for you or me, a machine like that has 1,000,000 seconds of subjective time. This is why Elon Musk talks about what we're doing is we're summoning the demon. We're about to build alien species that are going to be around on this planet. Even if they're not conscious, we will not be able to control them. You know, how might AI look in 15 years? How might biochemistry look in 15 years? Genetic engineering look in 15 years? And then it's difficult to imagine that, especially difficult because it's a multivariate equation or a problem. Advances in genetic engineering and in artificial intelligence and in materials engineering and in data mining and so on are all going to be happening at the same time. And as all of these things happen, there's an overlap of all of these technologies and they potentiate each other. Technological evolution will continue indefinitely. There is no clear endpoint, right? I mean, take any advance in genetic engineering. It isn't going to be the last advance in genetic engineering. We're already starting to develop artificial life forms. What we'll be able to do in 100 years if civilization lasts that long, advanced technological civilization, there's no telling. In 200 years, in 1,000 years, time continues. It's another 1 billion years before the sun goes supernova, right? And everything is accelerating. So there is no clear endpoint, and there's all this jumble of different layered interacting technological evolutions happening at the same time. And we are still tribal, talking, tool-making savanna apes with all the instincts that we had 10,000 years ago when we were getting out there with spears and, broken branches and smashing each other's heads in. And that combination of crude tribal in-group, out-group instincts that are hardwired into human nature on the one side, with exponentially evolving, super sophisticated technology, and an evolution, a technological evolution that has no endpoint. It just continues. How can that go well? How can that go well? I don't see how that can go well. Right now we have nations engaged in arms races, nuclear arms races, chemical arms races, conventional, battle tank arms races. But as we get swarms of killer robots that can find, identify, and kill people on an individual basis, and anybody can essentially download the code from the dark web to have, to build the machinery, to add to a hobby drone to do this kind of a thing, the arms race isn't going to be just between nations anymore. It could actually be between everybody and everybody. 30,000 to 50,000 people, I can't remember the exact number, are killed by gunfire every year in the United States. That's that's the size of a substantial city. The technology is going to continue to evolve. It's going to get cheaper and easier to kill people without being identified. Because right now with a handgun, you actually have to have a person in your line of sight, right? You have to actually be close by, right? And you have to be willing, you look in the eye and shoot them. When you're not in line of sight and you're hidden somewhere else, that reduces the potential cost and risk to you. It even reduces your psychological pain as the killer. You're not a criminal. I'm not a criminal. You're not a criminal. Criminals exist. Criminals do exist. Psychopaths exist. Bad people exist. They're real. They're not like you and me. They have less empathy. And making it easier and cheaper for them to anonymously kill other people isn't a good thing. The state is going to have to react to that. The state is going to have to react to that. We will demand it of the state. So how can the state prevent bad people from doing what I just described? Well, there is only one answer to that makes any sense, which is the state is going to have to monitor people very carefully. And that is going to require an incredibly intrusive state. I drink my coffee, I eat my bagel. What am I supposed to do? I think about these things. I can see that we live in the time before some very dark totalitarian technology systems are going to emerge. I'm giving an interview to you guys because I think it's useful for people to be aware where this is going. I don't have a simple answer about what we can do. I think we should defend liberal democracy with heart and soul. These technologies will lead to the loss of freedom. Maybe in the United States, maybe less in Germany because we've been burned before. But the technology continues to evolve. And can we exist in a world where there's one huge country like China that implements a totalitarian surveillance and control system and have another society which is free? Increasingly, artificial intelligence will be sophisticated enough that a lot of the routine work that we do will be done by machines, by AI-guided machines. Meaning and purpose in our lives is defined by the social role we have as workers, particularly in Northern European societies, and in Germany very strongly. As AI continues to develop along an exponential path of advancement, we will quickly see one job after another being displaced or replaced as AI grows in sophistication. And what will people do then? I think what people will actually do then is play sports and games. I think that we will probably even get paid to do that. You already got these gaming communities. People may well define themselves according to their playing tournament sports or games of one kind or another. Some people will still be necessary, of course, to run the technology systems in some way or another, at least for the next 20 or 30 years before AI gets to the point where it will be almost a demigod. What are these artificially intelligent systems going to be used for? Because they're going to have the powers of demigods. And if we allow them to be turned into, for example, artificial warriors, against which we as human beings have absolutely no defense at all. We can never fight them as humans. At best, we can have our own killer robots to try to fight the killer robots. If we allow things to go in that direction, things will go in a very dark direction indeed. The core of my message is we should stop the military game. We should reorient the military. We should repurpose the military, in fact, to implement the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, build civilian infrastructure, clean water systems, clean sewage systems, clean electricity systems. We have these public servants we call soldiers in very well organized, disciplined teams. They're very tough and capable people. Let's get them doing something useful rather than preparing for the next war, the next tournament in their killer sport. Because if we don't, the technologies that they continue to develop that will make them ever more powerful in terms of their ability to coerce and to survey the rest of us, that's going to get out of hand. That's going to blow up on us. And since we will not be able to take away the money and power from the military, it's far too entrenched, we have to actually repurpose it. We have to play judo. Rather than confront it and try to take its gun and its money away, we have to point it in a different direction, in a constructive direction. And if we fail to do that, then the future looks very dark indeed.